It's already Wednesday, which is an amazing thing when you get the short week, or at least short for me. Hopefully, it's not incredibly long for everybody else. We're here to continue our look at Spelljammer. I'm kind of running things in reverse of how I would have run them had I looked more advanced in terms of which books they had, how the books, the PDFs were managed, because I really was more interested in this, the concordance of arcane space, than I was in the lore. But still, wasn't a bad thing that we went through the lore yesterday. Hopefully, that wasn't too weird, because I think I started out by saying, yeah, more interested in the mechanics, and then the rest of the stream was on lore. But not bad stuff. Other than that, I don't have any notes. I'm just going to hop right in. And let's see. I am in, so as I've been saying with a bunch of these, I'm trying to be targeted. I'm trying to be a little bit more focused. So I'm not going to exhaustively read through every line. I'm most interested in the stuff about space and the travel and how the ships work. We can look at movement in terms of the tactical movement's interesting, a bit of that kind of Car Wars vibe and arcs of movement and firing and all that jazz. I'm less interested in that, but we can still look at it. And of course, other things I might pass over if you're here in the chat and there's something that you think is interesting, call it out. I will read some of the kind of intro stuff because I've been calling it a supplement. It's kind of I guess it's a supplement slash mini setting. It's a setting that you're essentially bolting on to your existing setting, which is adding space and adding the stuff to whatever campaign world you already have. But the way they're doing that is particularly in this edition, which is, we're in the second edition, so this is the first version of this, and it's changed. Some folks told me in 4th edition they updated it, and I guess 5th edition now they're updating it again. So this new cosmology, or new in terms of this book cosmology, is no longer exactly how it is in 5th edition. I think it's for the best. I think they've done some things to kind of tighten it up, and I've mentioned this in a few places where I felt like what they're trying to do here with space and how it fits in, it's a little bit clunky because you sort of have planes already that have a lot of the elements in it that sort of take, in some ways, in a meta level, sort of take up the where space would be. You could just go to the planes and go to this or that, and you have the astral sea, and you have this ethereal plane, and all these things that are kind of sort of space-ish, kind of fantasy space. Darren says space. Exactly. And then this then bolts on another version of fantasy space on top of it. It's kind of a lot to juggle. I think it would pose difficulties in terms of how you address it, how you make it somewhere to go. A lot going on. Whereas I think now they've kind of merged it in with either the kind of space jamming space is basically the ethereal plane or the ethereal sea or the astral sea or something of that nature. Just fits it in a whole lot better. It works a lot better with the existing cosmology that most folks are working with. It works a lot better with the existing spells and things that are out there, because you might ask yourself, why use a boat instead of using, say, a dimension door or some other kind of teleportation type? Well, there might be many reasons. It's hard to haul cargo and get a lot of people on board through the spells unless you have the super high level versions. And of course, maybe you have access to the boats earlier on in your game. But everything's kind of working the same way. So you don't have this weird push-pull of should we go into the planes or should we go into space? And then kind of from a story sort of fiction, like, do we need both of them? But anyway, this is kind of before all that. So they decided, yes, we're giving you space. Now we're going to learn exactly what all this space stuff is about. So I will read, I'm not going to read, like I said, all the text, but I will read the foreword, or at least some of this, because I think it's important to get their kind of background on what it is we're getting with this space jamming stuff. Everything you know about space is wrong. Infinite space, stars as flaming spheres of superheated plasma, movement through space as a balance of scientific forces, thrust providing acceleration and maneuverability, scientific fact backing up natural phenomena, life on other planets built along blocks of carbon or silicon elements. Forget all that, it's wrong. You can get out of the atmosphere on the back of a rock, fly between the planets through a breathable ocean of air, sail between the crystal spheres that surround the inhabited world on a river of magical energy, encounter roving mind flayers and beholders. The stars are living things in some areas, great bowls of fire in others, and pinpoints of light painted inside a sphere on others. Welcome to the Spelljammer universe. It is a magical universe. Right. So there we're getting it right on, right? We're not dealing with science. They're not trying to kind of take sort of our scientific understanding or the scientific understanding as it was in 1989 or whenever this came out. It's all gone. We're going with a completely fantastical outlook, which of course, which gets a thumbs up from me. The Spelljammer supplement treats the AD&D game world with its magic, myriad races, and dimensional gates as the real world and builds outward from there. This is a universe postulated on magical, not scientific laws. There are universal laws and they must be obeyed, but they are the laws of magic, not physics. The laws of Mordenkainen, Elminster, and Fistandulus, rather than Galileo, Newton, and Einstein. They sometimes appear strange and random to us who are accustomed to the workings of science, but to the characters who have lived their entire lives in this environment, nothing could be more familiar and logical. Okay. So and now here I'm going to have the note. I think I mentioned at the end of the last stream yesterday, I thought it was weird that they put that book first and not this one. And I posited whether they meant you to pick up the lore first and then get into the details. Here they're saying specifically you should read this book first, and then the lore book. And that's great. But for whatever reason, I'm guessing Wizards, I don't think Drive-Thru cares one iota. Wizards, when they took this box set and they created the digital PDFs of everything, they basically smushed these two books that are essentially two different booklets, smashed them into one PDF. And for whatever reason, they put the lore one up front, which means that just from a practical reading perspective, theoretically, you're supposed to flip to this book halfway through the PDF, read the back half, then flip back to the front and read it. Makes no sense. I don't know why they organize it in this way. You're literally just begging people to be kind of give them a harder experience. Maybe they'll fix that down the line. I don't know. Just something to be aware of. If you're just getting into Spelljammer and you buy the PDF on Drive-Thru, flip to the second book, which is, I don't even think it comes up. There's no kind of table of contents for both books. You just kind of have to scroll through one to get to the other one and then go backwards. It's weird. I don't know why they did that. And then we got some maps. All right, so then we got the whole table of contents. So I'm not going to go into everything with the arcane space, but I do want to get into at least the basics. Stuff like, how things generally work, phlogiston, all that wonderful things. I just want to see, I think, so we have a sidebar on ships and gravity planes, which here's where we get into things like, boy, do we need to get this in depth to it? So I think they're trying to do with these ships, right, is that, okay, so we're in space and we know that space has no gravity, right? But of course, with fantasy space, they're trying to deal with, well, how do you... That doesn't work. Like these ships, a lot of them aren't designed like the ISS or the space shuttle or things where you're strapping yourself in. They're built more as fantastical flying machines or literally boats that sail through space. So it's sort of incumbent that the kind of that you can play on these surfaces, use them in terms of combat or different tactical decisions, and kind of understand that what your ground is and kind of what's low, what's below you, what's above you, and you're not just floating off in the ether. So they want to create all this kind of crunch to say, okay, there's, gravity is going to be here and there, but it also, instead of, they could easily just say, look, whatever you're standing on, essentially everything has kind of a gravity. And if something's bigger than you has gravity, and I think that's kind of what they mean, but they start using to get kind of very technical. So we have gravity planes and things like that. And this is where I feel like even now we're always starting to get into the kind of like, man, you're maybe more crunched than we really need. Just kind of keep it simple. Keep it simple. Brian Smith says, choose your own chapter sequence. Yep. Hey, Brian Smith, that is exactly true. So we're getting into so I'm going to skip this on gravity planes. I think, you're on a boat. Basically, the boat has essentially a gravity, right? So that you can treat the boat as if it were on a surface, even though you're flying out into space. Space can be divided into two types, wild space and the phlogiston. Wild space is what comes to mind when we talk of space. It is the vast emptiness that lies between the planets and the stars. All space inside a crystal shell is wild space. It is mostly vacuum. More correctly, most regions of wild space are vacuum. But the cosmos is a big place, and there are exceptions to almost every rule, as shall be shown later. Wild space is not truly a void. However, even though it is often referred to that way, the simple fact that there is space rules out its being a true void. Hey, the Dave. Welcome. The phlogiston is a turbulent, unstable, multicolored fluorescent gas, or gas-like medium, which fills the regions between the crystal spheres. Very little is known for certain about the phlogiston or this region. Every planetary system known is encased within a crystal sphere. Essentially, the crystal sphere keeps the wild space in and the phlogiston out. This, of course, is a tremendous simplification, but is easy to grasp. Like the phlogiston, crystal spheres are a great mystery. Their origins and substance are unknown. Within wild space are the celestial bodies, planets, suns, moons, asteroids, and a host of other items collectively lumped together under the heading planetoids. Most celestial bodies have an atmosphere of some sort, although it is dangerous to assume that this is an inviolable rule. Brian Smith says, I wonder if any real astronauts ever played Spelljammer. We need to know is what is the space version of Tang, or the fantasy Spelljammer version of Tang? What would that be? And this is not Tang, but this is Pink Lemonade Spindrift for the working man. So we get a couple of things, right? Everything that we know, it would be in the case of if Earth existed in this kind of universe, everything that we know or see, or at least up until, say, our solar system, inside a big crystal sphere, and we can extend however this inside space, however long it goes, it would be sort of the mythology, whether the galaxies that we perceive as being far off are actually painted on the side of a shell, or there's something else, whatever it is. But however far we want to extend it, here inside some crystal sphere, and all the space inside this crystal sphere is the kind of space that we're more or less used to, more or less a vacuum, all that kind of stuff. But between our sphere, crystal sphere, and whichever other crystal spheres are floating around is this phlogiston stuff. Right, that's about it. So I'm going to skip over celestial bodies because I don't care too much. Now we get this nice, we're going to get some more about wild space and gravity, which I don't care ultimately about. But here we're getting into this, we see this drawing here, this diagram of a ship with the air envelope and the gravity plane. And already I can just, for myself, I can just feel some of my enthusiasm just starting to kind of drain away. Like, air envelopes is one of those things I kind of wish they just would have left alone. But there it is. So I guess we'll get into that. But I'm just going to read a little bit about wild spaces in case they give any other information about wild space. All the celestial bodies within a crystal shell float in an airless void called wild space. Conventional meaning those that take place on the prime material plane. Hold on, conventional, I see conventional, parentheses, meaning those that take place in the prime material plane. Interplanetary journeys around a solar system take place within wild space. It is the first obstacle that must be conquered by would-be space travelers. Because if you're on a planet and you're trying to get to another sphere, you have to pass through the wild space to the border of or the edge, the skin of your crystal sphere, and then you have to pass beyond it. So you got to go through the wild space first. As an adventurer moves higher, whether climbing a mountain or on the back of a rock, the atmosphere becomes thinner and thinner until at last it becomes vacuum. The climber can still breathe, however, because as he moves upward, an envelope of air clings to him. When he reaches the point where the planet's air is no longer breathable, he is breathing his own air, held near him by his body's own gravity. This air envelope attaches to everything that passes through the atmosphere and allows normal survival in wild space, at least for a short time. The disadvantage to such an envelope is its small size. The envelope of breathable air that attaches to any body has an all-around depth equal to the cross-sectional diameter of that body. So break out your calculators, your slide rules, your abaci. I'm not exactly sure, but whatever those are, because we're going to be getting to depth equal to the cross-sectional diameter of a body. Do we need all of that? No, I would have been happy for something a lot simpler, but hey, this is what they gave us. Now they're going to give us an example, though. A spherical beholder 5 feet across has an air envelope 15 feet in diameter. Similarly, a block of wood, which is 1 foot by 2 foot by 3 feet, is surrounded by a more or less rectangular envelope of air, which is 3 feet by 6 feet by 9 feet. Oy vey, right? All right, so now we get into how we're exhausting our air. A creature will exhaust the air in its personal envelope in 2d10 turns. Since this is barely enough time to get anywhere, most crossing of wild space is done with larger vessels, which have correspondingly larger atmospheres. The amount of air which a vessel can bring along limits the minimum size of most space-going ships to no less than 100 feet in length. This measurement is called the keel. The cost of moving this amount of mass limits the upper size of the ship. So, even though we're claiming that we're not doing this on science, they're inputting a lot of science, or at least I'm sure vastly simplified and probably edited, tweaked science into all this stuff, because now we're trying to figure out the cross-sectional diameters of bodies, and then figuring all this stuff out. It would have been easy, we could have just skipped all that and said, hey, look, I would have just said, we could just do something simple. Your personal air is going to run out in 2d10 turns. Bam. Done. I don't feel like I need this. And then for ships, I'm sure we could just do something where just ships are rated. Maybe you could have some kind of table for sizes. How many people roll this many turns, or I don't even know if roll. I mean, I think it would be fairly standard. You could even just say, hey, it'll last for X amount of turns. I don't even need the dice. I mean, do we need the dice at that point? I suppose for an individual might be breathing heavily, trying to hold their breath. You might want to extend that, but is it necessary? I don't know. Brian Smith says, semi-interestingly, our actual solar system does exist within a bubble with a surface on which stars form. Replace crystal sphere with bubble, and it's kind of accurate. I did not know that. And then they also say, reading of this book will exhaust one's air rapidly. This is true. So we do have all the rules you can need, and I believe there is more on air envelopes if you're interested. Hey, Marcello. Thanks for joining. On to gravity. The reason everything drags its own atmosphere around through space is gravity. This is also the reason why people can stand on a space-sailing ship without falling off its deck, and can stand on a spherical planet without falling off the bottom side. Every body in space has its own gravity. Gravity is an accommodating force in that its direction seems to be that which is most convenient. In an object the size of a planet, gravity is directed towards a point at the center of the planet so that people can stand anywhere on the surface and dropped objects fall perpendicular to the surface. In smaller objects like spacecraft, gravity is not a central point, but rather a plane which cuts horizontally through the object. Hey, Tucker Todd. Team Todd in the house. Nice to see. Okay, so now we get the reason why they make it a plane is because they want to be sure that if you're on one end of a ship and you drop something, the gravity doesn't pull it in some weird angle towards the center of the ship, that it just drops straight down. So there you have it. That is why they've made it a plane. You can see they have been putting thought into this. No one would suggest that they did not put a lot of thought in this, though. I just feel like they probably could have just simplified it, hand waved some of the stuff away. But here we have some more things about this gravity plane. Significantly, this gravity plane is two-directional. It attracts from both top and bottom. A sailor can actually stand on the bottom of the ship's hull and move around as easily if he was walking on deck. In this case, down is actually up, back toward the plane of gravity that cuts through the ship. One of the stranger side effects of all this is that an object falling off the side of a Spelljammer can oscillate back and forth across the plane of gravity, falling first in one direction until it crosses the plane, then reversing direction and falling back across the plane again, and so on until something causes it to stop. To a person standing on the deck, the object appears to fall down, then up, then down, then up. This trick is commonly used to amuse passengers new to space travel. More than one groundling has gotten in trouble for standing at the ship's rail and tossing an endless stream of apples overboard just to watch them bob. And then we have an example. A Viking longboat cruising through the fjords is suddenly thrown from its home into wild space. Its crew can still stand normally on its deck. Down for them is toward the bottom of the boat. Similarly, an individual could stand on the bottom of the longship and find that down for him was back toward the top of the boat. Someone who jumps off the deck of the boat would fall downward and pass through the boat's plane of gravity, whereupon the direction of gravity would reverse for him and pull him back toward the other side of the hull. Brian Smith, you can't just hand wave science away. No, you can't. But yeah, science fiction does all the time. And this is, we'd like to think it's just science, not even, science fantasy even, right? Well, yes, they're giving us a lot of details here. You could tell me if you find that this stuff is useful. I mean, look, the stuff in the bobbing and the gravity plane is kind of cool, and it does tell you some things. What I like about it is that in terms of, say, I don't even want to just say combat, but just tactical operations on board a ship in space, you could have a lot of fun with the gravity plane. Players could use it. Other creatures could use it. Things could happen. If you have to make repairs on the boat, what can happen is a party member can just walk over to the side of the boat, get underneath, make repairs, do things like that. You could even, and interestingly that they don't do this is I haven't seen any ships that have this kind of mirror surface. Because you think about all these ships, maybe because they have to land, all have a bottom and a top. Seemingly, they seem to have a lot of symmetry, but left in horizontal symmetry, not vertical symmetry. You'd think you'd have some cool boats with vertical symmetry, especially if they're not intended to really go maybe to planet surfaces. I guess the beholder ships, some of them seem to, because they're just kind of big bulbs and things, but you'd think maybe they could take advantage of that more. Imagine the parkour you could pull off. Yes, indeed. Martello says, my God, this is better than I thought. There's a lot going on here, Marcello. It is definitely interesting, and I always enjoyed it. Hey, if you're looking for crunch in your sci fantasy, they're not going to disappoint you. On to the helm. Ships travel through wild space by means of the helm, a magical device which converts mystical energy into motive force, the push that moves the Spelljammer. This allows rapid movement from planet to planet. Some of the specifics vary from race to race. In general, however, most ships are equipped with a magical device known as a spell-jamming helm. A mage or priest sits at the helm and acts as a living engine, providing the magical power to move the ship through wild space and to perform some basic maneuvering as well. Any magic can move a ship through wild space. The more powerful the magic, the faster and further the ship can move. Again, check under ship design for the effects of this. Taryn says at least double the weapon platforms. Yeah, you could easily have, catapults or ballista above and then catapults and ballista below. Yeah, I mean, I think they have to make some adjustments depending on how you intend to land these things, if you intend to land them. But yeah, it's interesting that there aren't really, other than I think those beholder ships, none of them really take advantage of that. The fact that you have a double-sided gravity plane. Well, of course, you could make your own. All right, so about the helms, right? So magic is going to power them. So you're going to want to have a priest or mage of some kind put a helm on and sit back there and move the ship. I'm going to skip some of this stuff. All right, let's get down to the crystal spheres. All wild space is bounded by crystal shells or crystal spheres. Inside the crystal sphere is the vacuum of wild space, the planets and stars. Outside the crystal sphere is the rainbow ocean of phlogiston and more crystal spheres. The size of a crystal sphere is determined by the size of the planetary system inside. Usually a sphere has a radius at least twice as big as the orbital radius of the outermost celestial body in the system. Did you catch all that? Let me repeat it for you, because this is obviously vitally important. The size of a crystal sphere is determined by the size of the planetary system, a radius at least twice as big as the orbital radius of the outermost celestial body. So, figure out your orbital radii, get the outermost celestial body, make sure you have that radii calculated, that radius calculated, double it, and that's the size of your crystal sphere. Is that actually important? I have no idea, but we've got that information. Break out the calculators now. Brian Smith asks, wait, is it a helm like a hat or a helm like a wheel? Do they even know, or is it a casualty of their cleverness? I don't think, that's a really good point. I don't think they said I don't remember reading. Now, remember, I didn't go through the lore line by line, but I don't think that they actually specified whether it was a hat. I just thought it was a helm like a ship's helm. So I just think that there's somebody manning a wheel somewhere or some similar device doing it. But you could easily look at, we're playing a fantasy game that with helmets and things. So you could think of it as, putting on like the helm like Professor X does in Cerebro and, and doing the ship that way. So that's a really good question. Dave says, I love how much math they were cool with in second edition. Yeah, but the funny here, Dave, is, hey, let's not give you any kind of things to tell you what those things should be. And I don't even think when they went through all the different We went through this, though I didn't read them closely. I don't remember there being really hard numbers in when they were defining Kryn space, for example, or something like that to give you the size. So I don't know why they just don't say, hey, it's always going to be like a certain amount of whatever distance. I mean, we don't even know the distances yet. They haven't really told us about the distances that ships can go. So we don't even know, how, is that a long way? Is that just a walk in the park? We don't know. Because of their great size, the outside of a crystal sphere appears perfectly flat. The curvature is so gradual that it is completely undetectable to anyone who's close enough to see the crystal sphere through the obscuring phlogiston. The spheres consist of an unbreakable, dark, ceramic material of unknown origin. Some legends state, and various theologians agree, that the smooth-surfaced shells were created and positioned by the gods themselves to protect their worlds from the ravages of the phlogiston, which is held to be the prime matter of the universe. Less charitable philosophers maintain that such shells were placed by an even higher authority to keep gods and men in and confine their activities. Whatever their origin, the crystal shells are uniform throughout space. All appear as great, dark, featureless spheres of unidentifiable matter. Yet they said ceramic, so it's somewhat identifiable. The crystal spheres are definitely solid. They have no gravity along either their interior or exterior sides, an exception to the rule that all large objects have gravity. No magic has been found that can damage or alter the surface of a shell, except for those spells which cause portals to open. Even this, however, is believed to be nothing more than an artificial triggering of a natural phenomenon, since portals also occur naturally and seemingly at random. They are apparently immune to the effects of wishes and even the wills of the outer planar powers, though this does not rule out the possibility that the outer planar powers created them. Perhaps they were wise enough to prevent even their own tampering. The crystal shell is an impassable barrier to space voyagers unless they are properly prepared or very fortunate. 5 methods are known for getting from one side of a crystal sphere to another. Number 1, it can be bypassed entirely with a teleport or dimension door spell. The traveler blinks from one side of the shell to the other without physically crossing the shell. Only a magical item or magical spell can effect such a transfer. 2, a phase door spell or magical device which duplicates that spell allows a ship or a portion of the shell to become immaterial so the ship can pass through. 3, naturally occurring portals pierce the shell in various locations at random and unpredictable intervals. Looking for such a portal can be a time-consuming task. Number 4, in some systems, stars are located around the fringes. Occasionally, such stars are themselves portals to other locations which can be accessed by diving into the heart of the star. Such portals are very rare. Voyagers definitely should check local listings before incinerating themselves in an unknown situation. I like that they injected a little humor because that is kind of funny. Like, oh, hey, there's a star near the edge of the crystal shell. Should we just fly into it and hope it's a portal? Yeah, let's give it a shot. And then finally, number 5. The legendary Spelljammer and creatures such as Space Dragon seem to have an innate ability to open portals to the phlogiston. These portals can close slowly over a long period, so other ships can sometimes pass through them. From outside a sphere, these portals are easily visible. Whew, all right, so now we got some ways to get it. It's basically, hey, magic, right? Magic or naturally occurring phenomenon. Those are your ways out. And what do you get for your trouble getting out of there? You get into the phlogiston. Outside and between the crystal spheres is a turbulent rainbow ocean of flammable ether called the phlogiston. The phlogiston is a multicolored sea upon which float the various systems within their crystal shells. The term phlogiston is applied equally to both the multicolored medium and to the entire region surrounding the crystal spheres. Terrence with the Space Dragon. We need Space Ghost. I do miss Space Ghost Coast to Coast, by the way. I know it's long gone. I've got some of the DVDs, but it was such a good show. Phlogiston has varying thicknesses in space and forms dense rivers between planet-sized objects such as the spheres themselves. Voyagers move along these paths of concentrated phlogiston discover that the greater the density of the flow, the faster a ship can move. A ship can speed up and slow down by penetrating deeper into or raising itself out of these phlogiston rivers. Stellar distances can be covered quickly in such areas. Further, the speed of the ship is at least partially dependent on the surface area it presents to the flow. So many ships carry sails to increase their speed in the interstellar ocean. All right, so now we understand why a lot of those ships had sort of insectoid shapes and had large wings or things that could become wings or conventional sails, and that's because you want to catch that phlogiston and ride it. Marcello asks, am I planning on reading or slash running the 5th edition adventure? I'm not sure yet, Marcello. That they don't have digital books for the 5th edition stuff, so it's and I don't have D&D Beyond. But we'll see. I don't know. I'm not sure. When is that? I wonder when is that book coming out? I don't know. We'll have to see. I might try to listen to the Scuttlebutt if people are really enjoying it. I am curious. I never read the 4th edition version of Spelljammer. I think it's 4th edition where they changed some of this up, and it sounds like the 5th edition one is more or less a continuation of the 4th edition one in terms of the updates and things like that. So I would like to see their updates. It may be easier to get a hold of the 4th edition book, maybe used there. They might be on the cheap, and I'll do that. Or maybe I'll pick up the 5th edition one. I don't know. We'll see. The Dave asks, have I ever seen Disney's Treasure Planet? It was essentially Spelljammer. I haven't seen that today. I remember seeing commercials and things for it. Never watched it. Maybe I can get my daughter to watch it since now we can, since she's, I have a daughter and she's 8, so she's in kind of the prime age range for a lot of the classic and not so classic Disney cartoons. So maybe I can get her to check it out. Where was I on the phlogiston? All right, gravity works in the phlogiston the same way it does in wild space. That's fine. Phlogiston is none of the recognized 4 elemental matters. All right, phlogiston is dangerously flammable, much like oil-soaked cotton, which poses its own problems. Any flame exposed to phlogiston causes the surrounding area, including the phlogiston-laden air envelope of the ship, to burst into flame. This flame expands immediately to 3 times its normal diameter and inflicts 3 times its normal damage. For this reason, fireballs, bombards, aquabuses, or arquebuses, and any other weapons which rely on a spark or flame are not used in the phlogiston. Yeah, that makes totally sense. Brian Smith, lost in the phlogiston. Yep, the Dave avoid fire spells. Yeah, if you have a magic user with an itchy trigger on their fireball spell, they might want to put a clamp on their lips when they're in the phlogiston. And then, and look, if in case we needed it, we have a nice little table, if you will, of the effects of various sources of flame, from candles, lanterns, oil flags, cooking fires, fireball, of course, and a match or a fuse. That's through lightning spells. They don't mention lightning spells today, but yeah, I would imagine a lightning spell would spark, right, just as much. Interesting that they don't actually seem to mention it. They talk about lighting a flask of oil, but not actually lightning. Clearly, that is an oversight, because yeah, I would imagine lightning bolt or similar would do damage too. Also blow up, but maybe they want to give someone an out. Maybe too many magic users were crying foul at fireball being taken away, so they said, well, we'll let you keep lightning bolt. I don't know. The crystal spheres bob in the phlogiston like corks in an ocean, mind-boggling enormous corks, but they do bob. As a result, over time the spheres actually shift their positions relative to each other. This almost never changes the courses of the rivers, however, so navigation is possible. But just because a ship passed a certain landmarks on its way from A to B does not mean the ship will pass those same landmarks on its way back to A from B. Fortunately, when crystal shells drift too close, the phlogiston between them thickens to the point where the 2 massive spheres are moved apart and collision is prevented. The spheres containing Toril, Earth, and Kryn form a stable triangle. Well, there you go. So basically, things can move. So you could still kind of lose things, and it's not quite the same as maybe losing things in a hex crawl sort of method, because it seems like the phlogiston is more or less a point crawl. You're going to get on these rivers, and they're going to take you various places, but because of the movements and things, if there could have been, say, an asteroid with an ancient ruin on it when you were going away, and maybe when you're coming back a week or 2 or maybe a month later, that asteroid with a ruin may have drifted off somewhere else, and you may not find it again. Brian Smith says, poor fire sorcerers never getting allowed on Spelljammer ships, just looking up into the heavens and shedding a tear. Oh, that's what an image. How sad. Yes, your fire specialist is not getting any love in the phlogiston. And this will be the kind of things that, and I don't want to pick on 5e players, but I just feel like these are the kind of things that in the modern version, I imagine they must change, because I could just see people crying foul. No fair, this class is based on fire, and now I can't do anything while I'm up in the phlogiston. Why would you do that to me, wizards? Why? Okay, breathing in space, which I already covered a bit. So we got the 2 to 20 turns. That's turns, not rounds. And then we start getting into that diameter stuff. If the human-sized body is standing on a rock 100 cubic yards in size, roughly 40 feet in diameter, it may have enough air to survive for several months. Larger than man-sized creatures, ogres and giants, for example, drag along enough air to last twice as long. Larger objects, such as ship, are rated for their tonnage. Each ton represents 100 cubic yards of space, which brings along enough air to support one human-sized crew member for 4 to 8 months. A 30-ton frigate, therefore, could support 30 crew members for 4 to 8 months under normal circumstances, and double that under reduced circumstances. This is fully explained on the chapter in ship design. So I kind of feel like this is the kind of shorthand you need, right? For each ton, 1 ton, 1 crew member, 2d4 months. Or, I don't know, 1d4 plus 4 months. Or 1d4 plus 3, no. Anyway, somewhere in there between 4 to 8 months. But, here we're getting diameters things. And I'm also curious if whether in 4th edition or 5th edition, they made some simplified way of dealing with the diameters. Because, look, I don't want to do this math, and I'm happy with a lot of the math and stuff in a lot of these old school games, and I didn't want to do this math back in the day, and I certainly don't want to do it now. But folks playing 5th edition that don't even want to count their arrows and things, they're not going to want to deal with the diameters and blah, blah, blah. They're just going to want either some kind of dice or just some flat number, which I would have been fine with. These are the things where I feel like it gets to a level of crunch where it's diminishing returns. The specificity or whatever they were getting, and it's not even that much because it's like 4 to 8 months. I still got to figure out, okay, so I've got a 30-ton frigate and a 30 crew members. How long can they last? 4 to 8 months. I still got to figure out somewhat. Do I do D6 plus 2, whatever, something. How do I figure that? How do I know whether we're on the 4 months or the 8 months of that range? Like, how do I decide that? So even with this extra specificity and figuring out diameters and things it's not like I have a flat number unless I just average it and I'm just gonna say 6 months, which would probably be where I'd put it. Instead of just saying 4 to 8, I'm just gonna say 6 months. And maybe if you have some special skill, you zen in the art of breathing in space, maybe you can up that to 7 months or 8 months, something like that. It's just I don't need it, and I don't know what my game is getting for that. I get that there's the same kind of resource management that say is in a hex crawl, but even then the extra fiddliness, I just want to know, like 6 turns for a torch. Does each torch last exactly 60 minutes? No, but we're just gonna abstract and say, sure, for purposes of the game, all torches basically last that long. In the same way, I don't want to fiddle with all these diameters. For at least for boats and ships, you can just say we have a tonnage, and once we set a tonnage, we can just get the numbers from there. For other things, like I don't want to fiddle around too long with someone saying, well, I jump on this 100 cubic yard asteroid, and now I got to pull out the slide rule and figure out all these things. I would have no idea that a rock 100 cubic yards in size is roughly 40 feet in diameter. I don't know that. I'm glad they gave me that example. I would just use that. All rocks. How big are they? 100 cubic yards, 40 feet in diameter, roughly. That would just be every rock in my universe. So moving on the planetary display, I think there was one of the maps that was sort of had some hexes on there, kind of a black space. I wonder if that was for planetary, the so-called planetary display. I do not know. We're now into, we're now into celestial mechanics. Universe building, pre-planned universes, DM creating universes. And we got some questions here if you want to do some sort of worlds without number style answer questions, or I guess worlds without number is potentially spell jamming style since it came first. We got some questions we could ask about DM created universes. We could also randomly generate some universes. Always fine. We get the example of Kryn space. We get another planetary system. Spells in space, which is an appendix. It's cool. So, essentially it's giving us, hey, we've talked about some things about how space operates, how the phlogiston operates. So here we're giving you some ideas of what some of these things do in some of these phenomena. So at least it's nice. I think it's a nice attempt. I don't know if it covers everything completely, but at least it's giving you a lot of, okay, we know we've created some new edge cases, and so the ones we've recognized, we're just going to talk about with those spells, which is cool. But I'm not going to go through all of them. But they're there, and now we did wizard spells. We did priest spells, and now we get some travel times in basically Earth solar system, given 2 methods, and they give us Kryn too. I don't remember too much about Kryn, so I don't know. Do they ever get off? Do they ever do anything on these other planets? Are they just mentioned in the? I don't know. I don't know anything about Kryn, but it's there. Oh, here's the outer planetary display. Yeah, I think we do have the map. That's one of the maps that's provided, which I guess if you get it digitally on drive through, it'll be a PDF. No idea how that will print or not, but you do have it. We get Greyhawk planets also, Toril also. So we got all those for your standard systems. And here we get a blank planetary display so we could set up for our own. And then we get another appendix on the Rock of Brawl, otherwise known as the Rock. It's a merchant city of humans and humanoids situated on an asteroid. It's basically your kind of sigil or sigil, however you pronounce that, in space. And you got a lot of stuff. And then we get, here are the cards. So in the original box set, these are nice letter-sized cardboard, I don't know, cardstock kind of cards. Obviously here we're getting them as part of the PDF, but it gives you some nice art and things for your main ship, so that if your party scores one of these, you could hand them the card and they can keep it, and you can get the layouts and everything, all that stuff. And then we get, these are, if you wanted to cut these out and use as markers for when you're using the tactical combat, if you want. And these, I guess, are for planetary exploration. And here's the maps. Ooh, riveting. And that is the Rock, right? The Rock of Brawl. That is a form of Brian Smith. In my universe, all rocks floating in space are 40-foot diameter standard space rocks. Absolutely. All right, folks. So that was, I'm zooming up here through the book. That was Spelljammer. Let me know in the comments or in my forums or wherever what you think of Spelljammer. I am curious like I said, I might look at what they did in 4th edition or 5th edition. I'll see which book I can get a hold of. I'm more interested at that point in the changes they made to just unite this sort of spell jamming cosmology with the existing cosmology. I think they realized at some point that there was a better fit, that they could fit it in better than what they did. The spheres is cool. The phlogiston is actually kind of cool, but you also already have these concepts of these sort of planar seas. So why create phlogiston and that thing when you already have the astral sea, ethereal plane, all these things that kind of line up similarly? I like that they brought phlogiston back. Phlogiston was it was in, I think, the 18th century when they're trying to figure out either what air was or things. They were coming up with different materials, and phlogiston was one, I think, theory of what air is or something to do with that. So I like that they brought that out for this, but it's one of those ideas that, yeah, it's great. It is thematic in its own way, but it just adds whole other level of things where in which you have to kind of work things out. Whereas if you just used astral sea or the ethereal plane or something like that, you already have all that stuff. We already know how it works. We already fits into most people's cosmologies. More easy peasy. I'd also like to see if they did simplify any of the maths involved, because it's a bit crunchier, I think, with not as much rate of return on the crunch. The crunch, sure, if you like that stuff, you've got it. But I think often enough, people are just going to want to say, well, you know what, your standard crew, 4 months, 8 months, whatever. Just give some numbers, and then we can kind of figure it out from there. Or, yeah, the diameter of space rocks, just make it of a certain mass. Because it would be easy to say just, hey, if it's a certain mass, then it holds a certain amount of air around it. Which maybe there'd be some edge cases like, well, what about if it's a supermassive black hole and it's the size of a pinhead? But you could say, well, it's still got all that gravity. I mean, it's a black hole, though. Maybe at that point, the whatever atmosphere would have has been sucked into the black hole, so it probably doesn't even matter. But if there was like it's a white dwarf and it's who cares? I don't care. Like whatever edge cases for that, if it makes it a lot easier than me having to figure out these other things, then that probably is just like, yeah, you know what? Or you can even make it like a man size. When looking at things, talk about man sizes up until a certain thing, or talk about ship sizes. Give them tonnages like ships, then we can use the same ship math. I don't know. There's probably an easier way to do it than they chose to, but they did. But there's some cool things in here. I like a lot of the stuff that they added in. It is fun to get your kind of space on. And certainly if you wanted to do something like play a science fantasy or space fantasy, science fantasy, kind of your Buck Rogers, your Star Wars, with these rules, because you can take this stuff out. And granted, in Spelljammer, they're using a lot of hodgepodge of ships, but you could totally throw this if you wanted to use X-Wings and TIE Fighters, because they follow a lot of the same kind of goofy rules, right? Where in Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo's on that asteroid, and granted, they end up being inside a worm. Spoilers, they're inside a worm on the asteroid, but they walk out into what they think is supposed to be deep space with just a little thing over their mouth. That could easily be a thing of this kind of following similar Spelljammer rules of, hey, yeah, 140-foot diameter rock. We can do air in here. So there's a lot of things to like. I don't remember it being super popular back in the day. I do think it's one of those things that people glommed onto sort of after the fact and had a sort of romantic vision of it. But I didn't even know they'd done a 4th edition version. So maybe it was more popular than I'm imagining. Maybe my memories of its popularity or lack thereof does not equate to what was going on with the community. If you played Spelljammer back in the day, let me know. I would be curious to know how long you played it. What did you use it for? Did you just fly around in the space inside your sphere? Did you do a lot of traveling outside the spheres? But yeah, I think there's a lot of neat stuff you could use. And that is Spelljammer. Let's see, before I hang out of here, Brian Smith says, throw out some of the crunch, pump up the weird, and blend it into existing designs. Seems like those would be the best focuses. Yep, I think so, and I'm guessing that 5th edition is the 5th edition version. If the 4th edition one didn't do that already, I imagine that's probably what the 5th edition one could do. But yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff you can pull out of here and use. And I really like the Lizardmen story about them trying to basically better themselves as a species, recognizing that the closer they are to suns when they hatch, the smarter they are. So to keep breeding smarter and smarter Lizardmen, it reminds me a little bit in a way of the Sleestaks in Land of the Lost, where in the future they become hyper intelligent. And what was his name that comes back? Oh, what was the name of that Sleestak? I can't remember his name. Was it Enoch? I don't remember. Go back and watch Land of the Lost. That's a reference that'll date me as sure as anything. Sleestaks, yeah. Well, that's all I got, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want more Spelljammer stuff, let me know. Otherwise, I'm not sure what I'm going to do the rest of the week. Again, I mentioned it's the start, but it's definitely a short week, so I had the Monday off. Everything feels kind of compressed. So really, I just have one more day of sort of my choice or your choice of streams before we're back to Friday and the OSR Reddit Roundup. So enjoy the rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, and I'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.